Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is staying healthy and happy. The first two-thirds of the CS220 course covered all the topics which are fundamental to programming aspects. If you consider any other introduction to programming course, those topics would be quite similar. Whereas the last one-third of the CS220 course focuses on data science related topics. Starting with today's lecture, the next three lectures are going to cover the topic of the web and the internet. Following that, we are going to spend about a week on the topic of databases. So, even if you do not use programming as part of your future career, learning and knowing information about databases is critical. That is because it is highly likely that you'll encounter a database as part of your future professional career. Right. After that, we are going to spend about a week on plotting, which is a very interesting topic because plotting offers you this opportunity to visualize your data, and you can very easily answer a lot of questions by looking at the visual plots in terms of the data rather than working with the raw data set itself. And then finally, we are going to have one lecture on randomness, and with that, we'll wrap up this course. Uh, I know that all of you have been working really hard. Hang in there. You just have a few more weeks to get through and keep working hard on the projects and the lectures. You might be wondering, why exactly do we have to learn about the topic of internet in a data science course? So the answer to that question is quite simple. There are tons of data out there in the internet for you to download, process, and analyze. So if you go to the course website, I have a web page called datasets.html, which contains examples of datasets. You can go poke around on that web page to learn more. I want to actually focus on three specific examples. So the first example that I want to cover is the open payments data set. So the pharmaceutical industry often offers specific perks to specific doctors, sort of like a quid pro quo. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the term quid pro quo by now. So um, what is bad about this arrangement is that there aren't any regulations which control exactly what perks that pharmaceutical folks can offer which doctors. The good part of it, though, is that all of this information is public and it can be tracked online using the open payments dataset. You can just like go poke around in this data set and try to find interesting information about specific doctors in your locality that you can look up. The second example that I want to provide will be interesting to you if you're interested in literature or humanities in general. The example is Project Gutenberg, which offers a large collection of free ebooks for you to download and analyze. The final example that I want to talk about is the fact that a lot of cities in the US make a lot of their information publicly available. Especially the city of Madison has done a wonderful job in making majority of its data public, with a very few exceptions where part of the data set is not made public to ensure user privacy. Uh, what sort of things can you expect from the city data set is that you can try to find information on what are the trees which are being managed by the city of Madison, or information like where within the city limits do accidents occur, vehicle accidents. You can think of taking that information and doing some analysis which tries to find out how can we make the city a safer place for drivers in general. And you can also find information about the Madison public bus infrastructure, like when and where exactly people get onto the buses, and where is a specific bus at any given point of time in the real time, and so on. So, given that there is a ton of data out there for you to download and analyze, why not just download all of this data manually? So the answer to this question is twofold. So the first motivation for not doing a manual download is that there is often too much data out there. For example, in the project Gutenberg, there are 57,000 free books for you to download and analyze. Imagine what sort of hectic task would it be for you to download every book in that data set manually. I'm sure it'll take like a week or so of effort, and it's unnecessary, tedious effort as well. So it's very helpful for you to write programs to be able to download the data set for you from the internet. So the second motivation for not doing a manual download is that data doesn't often come in the form of files. Uh, what do I mean by that? Let's talk about an example here, which is an OpenStreet map data set. So, OpenStreetMap offers this data set where within the US you can find information about what is the latitude and longitude of the road infrastructure within the US, or where are the bike paths within the US, and so on. So, often services like OpenStreetMap do not allow users to download the whole data, because the whole data is like very large in size. Instead, they provide an opportunity for users to invoke API function calls, which enable you to download part of the data set that you're interested in processing. For example, you can just mention a rectangular area of interest by giving latitude and longitude, and try to get like specific structures of interest like bike paths within that rectangle from OpenStreetMap. So what enables these APIs is something which is called as remote procedure call. So remote procedure call stands for RPC, which enables you to invoke the API calls on some other machine and get the data from some other machine onto your laptop. All right. So before we focus on how message passing works in the internet, I want to talk about the basics of network operation. And let's take into account a very simple network where you have your laptop, which is going to be computer one, and then you have another machine somewhere on the internet, which is going to be computer two, which can either be a laptop or let's say it's a powerful server. So let's talk about how exactly can we pass messages between your laptop and this remote computer somewhere on the internet. So since I mentioned messages, so messages are what are going to enable you to transmit information from one computer to another. So there are going to be two different types of messages that you have to deal with in general. So the first one is called request message, and the second one is clearly the response message. Let me talk about a couple of different types of request message that you will often deal with when it comes to sending data over a network. So the first type of request is that let's say the remote machine or the computer has a lot of data that you want to fetch onto your local laptop. Let's say, for instance, you're trying to access the course web page, and suppose the remote machine has the contents for the course web page. In that particular case, you'll just like ask for specific files from the remote machine. That's going to be the first type of request that you often initiate from your computer. And the second type of request that you have to sometimes deal with is, let's say you're recording a video. For instance, I'm recording this particular video lecture, and once I'm done recording the video, I want to be able to upload it to the internet and put it onto YouTube, for example, right? So in that particular case, my request message is going to contain a lot of data, and I want that data to be uploaded to my remote machine so that other people can actually access the data, right? So that's going to be the second type of request that you often deal with. So the remote machine, once it receives the request, it actually processes the request, and then it will send you another message which is going to contain the response, which might contain the data. In the first case where you're trying to fetch the course website, a lot of data will be included as part of the response. Whereas in the second type of request case, when you're trying to upload a lot of data onto the remote machine, all that you need to know is whether the upload succeeded or not, and the response is going to tell you whether the upload was successful or not. So the response content varies according to what type of request that you send from your laptop. All right. A couple of other terms that I'm going to throw at you is something which is called as the client and the server. So the machine, at a high level, the machine which is trying to send the request to the remote machine is something which is called as the client, and of course the remote machine itself is called the server. Whereas at a very specific level, if you think about it, your laptop will be running multiple programs, uh, at the same time, and similarly the server might also be running multiple programs at the same time, right? So the term client can be associated to individual programs on your laptop, so those can be called as client programs. And similarly, the term server can also be associated with individual programs running within the remote machine. All right. So the challenge in terms of like how to get this whole thing working in terms of scaling it to the internet level is that there are millions of computers out there. So how do you know which computer to send or to ask the data from, or to send the data to? So how do we identify computers like we identify human beings in the real world? For example, my name is Meena, right? I'm hoping I'm the only Meena in CS220 class, but everybody can identify me because I have a name. Similarly, we need to think about how exactly can we create names for computers, right? So, in order to make this concept quite clear, I'm going to do an analogy to a real life scenario where, let's say, I want to send a physical letter to one of my long lost friends, which I mean, let's say I'm trying to get in touch with her or him for some reason. Of course, like I will remember my friend's name, right? Even though I might have forgotten where my friend lives, I'll still remember my friend's name. And if that particular scenario occurs, I'll have something which is called as the physical address book, where I'll have all of my friends' name listed and each of their address information and phone number information written down somewhere, right? So I can just like look up the address book using my friend's name and find her physical address, and then I can just put that physical address on the envelope and somehow trust that the postal service will get the letter to her at her home. So this is how sending letter works in real life, right? Similarly, sending messages between computers work in a similar manner. So, similar to physical addresses which human beings have, there is going to be something which is called as address to a computer, which is governed by a protocol called as internet protocol. So, I'm just throwing another terminology at you, right? So, what exactly is a protocol? So, protocol is a set of rules which defines how exactly the message passing should occur between your laptop and the remote machine, between your client and server. So there are various protocols which enable the internet, and internet protocol is one of the basic protocols which enables us to create something which is called as internet protocol address, which is a unique address which is going to be associated with each of the computers. So let me quickly give you details about this particular example of an IP address. Internet Protocol in short stands for IP. So this IP address is an example of an IP version 4 address, which is a 32-bit notation, and it has a dotted decimal format where you have like four parts to the IP address, which are referred to as octets. So, if you want to learn a lot more details about how computer network works, I would recommend that you should take the Computer Science 640 course, which is going to go into specific details of how the Internet Protocol works and so on. All right. So now that we have a way of addressing each computer, how do we actually get the message from one computer to another? As I mentioned, you need to send a request message to this particular IP address, right? So, what is so complicated with this is that human beings don't really do well remembering numbers, right? So, if I ask you to remember a bunch of these numbers to access my course website, for instance, that's going to be tricky for you to remember every time. So, instead, what we have as a solution to this problem is we have something which is called as domain name. An example of domain name would be my course website, for instance, which is www.mshyamkumar.com. Instead of saying I want to send the request to this particular IP address, I'm going to say that I want to send the request to this domain name instead. And of course, there is another protocol called domain name system protocol, which governs how the domain name gets converted to individual IP address. I'm not going to go into details of that. For now, assume that if you type in a domain on your Chrome browser, that's somehow getting converted to this IP address format, and the request gets transferred to the machine with this particular IP address. Also, again, I'm not going to focus on how exactly the request is transmitted between your laptop and the remote machine. For that, you need to understand about routers, which are devices which sit in between your laptop and the remote machine, whose job is to pass the message from one router to another until it gets to the correct destination, which is the remote machine. All right. So let's assume that somehow the domain name gets converted to the IP address and the request successfully gets to the remote machine. After that, how do you actually get the request to individual programs running on the machine, the remote machine? For example, let me give you a scenario where, like, you have both a Chrome browser open on your laptop, and you're also running a Python program, let's say using idle. So concurrent applications can run at the same time on your laptop and on the remote machine as well. So how do you identify which program is the one which is sending the data and which is the one which is supposed to receive the data? So the answer to this problem is usage of port numbers. So let me actually go back to my analogy of sending letters in real life. I'm sure most of you live in apartments. So all of the people living in the same apartment building have the same street address, right? So how do you exactly get the letter into a specific apartment in that apartment building is by using something which is called as apartment numbers, right? So once you know which apartment number that a particular person lives in, you can get the letter to them specifically. Similarly, port numbers enable you to get a message into a specific program within each of the client or the server. So, for example, in this particular server snapshot, I have two different Python programs, each running on port 8080 and port 5000, and I also have a Nginx uh, you know instance, which is becoming a popular web server. So let's take a look at how you can mention the port number. So the way that port number is mentioned is you'll append the port number to the IP address with a colon. So the format is going to be IP address colon port number to reach from one laptop's program to another server's program. For instance, to reach Nginx, I'm going to use port 80 if I want to send a request message to that particular program. All right. So, couple of default ports that I want to talk about are port 80 and port 443. Port 80 is for HTTP connections, and port 443 is for HTTPS. I'll be covering the topic of HTTP shortly. All right. So let's talk about what request messages contain and what response messages contain. And for that, I'm going to introduce to you the HTTP protocol, which is in short for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So let me actually talk about the terms in the name of this protocol itself. So the term hypertext stands for a word or set of words which has a hyperlink. So what exactly is a hyperlink? A hyperlink is nothing but a link which you can click on, which takes you to some data on the internet. So any text which has such a hyperlink is going to be referred to as hypertext. And the term transfer protocol is quite evident as to what exactly that refers for, right? We want to use this protocol to transfer messages from one laptop to another laptop or another remote server on over the internet. So the term transfer protocol. So one other thing that I want to mention here is you're going to be seeing the term hypertext in multiple other places. For example, in the next lecture, I'm going to cover the HTML format, which stands for hypertext markup language. So which is going to be a format that you use to build and access web pages. So again, since that has to do with hyperlink, the term hypertext is used there as well. So HT in general, HT in the HTTP or HTML stands for hypertext. All right, so let's try and understand the basic of HTTP protocol. HTTP protocol is very easy to understand if you try to compare that with how human beings in general communicate. So let's try to understand the specific aspects of it. So as I mentioned, there is going to be a request message and a response message that you need to deal with. So let's take a look at what exactly you need to mention when you're trying to generate a request message. So there are three things that you want to include in your request message. So the first thing is which computer that you want to get the information from, which is given by the domain name. And of course, which program within the server that you want to request the information from is given by the port number. And then the third piece of information that you need to include as part of your HTTP request is which data do you want to actually get from the remote server, which is often the home page of some particular website, right? For example, you can ask for index.html, which is the common web page or home page for most of the websites, or you can ask a specific page like about.html, or even like a logo or any other image which could be of the GIF form or PNG form or any other form. All right. So, just to do a recap, there are three things which are quite significant when it comes to the request. So, you need to have a domain name, port number, and the file name that you're trying to access. So, let me provide you an example of how you can sort of like funnel down to specific resource that you're trying to access. So, these three things correspond to these three questions, right? Which computer are you trying to get the information from? And then which program on that computer that you're trying to get the information from, and then what information are you trying to get from that particular program. Let me actually give you an example by talking about something which is called as a URL. So URL is short for Uniform Resource Locator. So URL is the construct which enables you to put together all three of these things and form a request form what you need from a request message. So let me actually give you an example of the URL to the Wikipedia page about URL. So as you can see, we talk about what protocol that we are dealing with here, which is HTTPS. HTTPS is just a secure version of the HTTP protocol. And then you have the domain name, which is n.wikipedia.org. And then you have the port. And then finally, you have the actual resource that you're interested in fetching from the remote server, which is going to be /wiki/URL, right? So one other thing which I want to mention is since there are a lot of defaults when it comes to port numbers, you needn't actually mention some of the default ports. For instance, 443 is the default port for a HTTPS connection, so you don't have to really mention it, so you can actually feel free to skip it. Similarly, port 80 is the default for HTTP connection. So that is again something which you can skip instead of mentioning it every time. All right. So I spoke about how exactly to specify all of the details that we want to include as part of the request message using a URL, right? So how do we actually get form the rest of the HTTP request is just by using some plain text format. So the first thing that you're going to mention other than the URL is going to be the type of HTTP request method. So let me give you an example. The example which I want to give you is the get HTTP method, which just stands for getting the data from the remote server. And then you're going to have a bunch of other details as well, which I'm not going to get into. And then of course you're going to mention what URL that you want to, what resource that you want to access. All right. So the next thing that I want to talk about is what happens once the server processes the request and generates a response. Is that, of course, like all the response contents will be included as part of the HTTP response message. Other than that, one other thing that I want to highlight is something which is called a status code. So every HTTP response contains status code information, and whenever you have a successful request that is being processed and the response is being sent back, your status code is always 200 OK in that case. So 200 OK means like your request was processed successfully, and that whatever response you received is the response from the remote server. There are going to be other status codes, and I'll give you examples in a couple of slides. All right. So just to give a highlight of what we discussed, HTTP requests and responses are plain text messages, and then of course you send a bunch of other details other than the requested information or the file that you want to request itself, along with the method of the request. And then the HTTP response is going to contain the actual response, which is the content. And then in this case it's the content of the about.html page that we want to actually get from the remote server. Let me actually give you examples of a couple of other status codes. 200 is all good. 404 is an example where you don't have the file that you're trying to access on the remote machine. It stands for file not found. And 500 is an example of internal server error where something goes wrong with the server processing, and then somehow the server is not able to give you the data that you're asking for. Let me actually give you a couple of other examples of HTTP request methods. So, GET is one of the most common methods which you're going to use to download data from the remote server. Let me talk about POST, which is the method which enables you to upload the data from your laptop to the remote server. For example, the video lecture upload case where I upload the lecture onto YouTube, I'll be using a POST request instead of using a GET request. There are a few other methods other than GET and POST, like put and delete, which you don't really need to know for the purpose of this course. So I covered a lot of terminology, a lot of information so far. Just try not to get overwhelmed with all these terminologies, and try to understand the fundamental concepts of how HTTP enables message passing from one laptop, client laptop, to a remote server. All right. Before I move on to today's lecture demo, I just want to quickly talk about what module we'll be using to process HTTP requests. So, we are going to be using the request module. You need to actually do a pip install of the request module. So, the request module is just like referred to as HTTP for humans. That's because of its ease of usage and the clarity that is available as part of the request module. The default module for processing HTTP requests included as part of Python is something which is called as the URL lib. People don't often use that because requests is more easy to use. So we are also going to be using requests in the following lecture code demo. All right. So I have a bunch of other slides from now on, which is going to give you details about whatever I'm going to cover as part of today's demo. But I'm going to actually move from the slide deck to using Jupyter Notebook instead. So let me actually get started by showing you a simple text file that I have on my website. So let me actually copy paste the URL from the slide deck and onto my browser. As you can see, this is just a simple text file which has a string which says like, "Hello CS220 students, welcome to my website. Hope you're staying safe and healthy." All right, so let me show you how you can fetch the content of this particular file onto your Python data structure, preferably into a string, right? Because this particular information is of string type. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to be able to import the request module. So let me go ahead and import request. So I want to take this opportunity to mention once again that make sure to have all of your import statements up at the top of your Jupyter notebook, because that makes it very easy for somebody else to read your code. So let me go ahead and copy the URL. So since, as you can see, the URL is nothing but a string, so I can just like save it into a variable called URL. So all that I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the request module to send a get method request to this particular URL. Let me go ahead and send the request. So as you can see, this particular request generates something which is called as the response object. Let me go ahead and capture the response object in a variable called R. So couple of things that I want to tell you about the response object is, first thing is like how to look at the status code. You can just like look at r dot status code to check what status that particular HTTP response actually gave us. As you can see, this is giving me 200 OK status code. It's often needed for you to add an assert statement to check whether the status code is 200. So let me give you a reason for why you might need to add such an assert. So let's say that I have a typo in my URL. So I'm just like converting my good hello.txt file into this big typo. And you know what, let me actually go ahead and make a copy of that URL so that you can have this later for you to check. And let me call it typo underscore URL. So all right, and let me, yeah, as you can see, let me go ahead and comment the assert. So as you can see, whenever you just run the get request, it doesn't actually throw any error saying that that particular file hello.txt cannot be found. So it's essential for you to assert that your response status code is often not often, it should be 200. So let me actually go ahead and move this particular good URL to down here. uh, Another thing that I want to mention is that since this is often used, they came up with a shortcut for this particular assertion. And the way that you can call the assert is by saying r dot raise for status. So that particular function call is going to be a shortcut for asserting status code is 200. Okay, all right. So let me go ahead and run the cell. Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. I forgot to, as you can see, that particular raise for status function call actually works fine, and it tells me that I have a 404. So I fixed the URL to the correct one, and I'm going to go ahead and rerun that. Now we didn't get any asserts, so that's good. So the next thing that I want to show you in terms of the response object is something which is called as r dot text. So r dot text is going to give you the content of the response message which was obtained from the remote server. So as you can see in this particular example, this is just string data, right? So it's very useful to have the structure as such. So let me actually show you what happens when you do this with the error case. So let me go back to the error case here, and let me add an r.text in. Sorry, I need to actually remove the assertion, otherwise it's not going to execute anything after that. So as you can see, if I remove the assertion, you're going to see some form of HTML code. So this, we are going to deal with this as part of the next lecture, but I just want you to take a look at an example of what HTML format looks like. All right, let me go ahead and comment that. um, all right. So going back to the correct case where you have the text as r.text, so you can just like store this information into some other variable and feel free to do any processing with that variable. So this is just a very simple example where you have a string as part of the particular file's contents, right? So let me go ahead and give you a little bit of not complicated, a better example. Let me actually show you a JSON file which I have as part of my course website. So let me replace hello.txt with scores.json. So as you can see, the scores.json file has a dictionary where we have three players, and each of those players has a particular score. So often a lot of people will have such JSON files posted on their course, not course website, on their website, where they periodically keep adding new data, let's say every minute. You can imagine writing a program which fetches the JSON every minute and then processes the newly added data. All right, so let me copy paste this URL, and let me actually show you how you can send a request to this URL and process the response for it. So let me go ahead and do a get request to this particular URL. And once again, I'm going to include the raise for status function call to ensure that I'm getting 200 OK. As you can see, I did get 200 OK. And let me actually tag this as JSON example so that you can see it when you get there. And this is like a simple string example. All right. So let me actually show you what you get when you try to access r.text. So as you can see, r.text is in a string format. Wouldn't it be nice if you can have the same content in JSON format? So recall that you need to import JSON module whenever you need to actually deal with JSON formatting. And there are a couple of function calls that JSON module offers, and the first one is your JSON dot load function call, which takes a file object as a parameter, right? So sorry, had trouble typing object over there. So that's not going to be very useful for you in this scenario because we don't have files here. Instead, we have the data in a string format, right? So recall that JSON has another, function called as the load s function, which stands for load string, load s. So you can pass the string as the variable to this particular function. Let me actually leave these as comments for you to check in later. So as you can see, you can load a string. So, and let me try giving uh, let me actually save r.text as URL text string, and then give that as a parameter to JSON JSON.loads function call. So let me run it. So as you can see now, JSON.loads returns a neatly formatted JSON structure. If you want to take of course, by looking at it, you can see that it's actually a dictionary, but you can confirm that by using the type function call. Let me show you the type function call. As you can see, type shows that this is of type dictionary. So let me go ahead and save this into a dictionary called D, and then let's try to see how we can manipulate this. So oh, sorry, yeah, and then let me go ahead and print D. So this print is coming from my type print. Let me go ahead and print the dictionary. All right, so similar to how they have race for status as a shortcut for asserting status code is 200, since this is also very commonly used, they have a shortcut for this as well. So you can just, instead of saying JSON.loads, you can just say r.json, and that's going to give you the dictionary which is coming out of that particular let me actually leave this comment, leave the old format as comment, and this is going to be shortcut for JSON dot load as, and the shortcut is you're going to say r.json, and let me go ahead and print D over here. All right. Something was off with that. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm missing the function call. Okay, got it. So, clearly, like the race for the status, this is also a function call. All right, so now we have the dictionary which is being converted to JSON format by using the shortcut function call over here. So this is a shortcut for JSON dot loads. All right, so you of course can do any manipulation with your JSON dictionary after you get the data into any required format. The next example that I'm going to talk about is, let me actually go back to the slides. So this is going to be the first demo that I'm going to cover as part of this lecture. So I want to introduce to you something which is called as the Reddit website. So if you haven't already used Reddit before, Reddit is sort of this platform where you can have people talk about their opinion Sorry, let me actually try to access the website first. Sorry, let me put up the website here and keep talking about that. So Reddit is this platform which enables users to have a discussion forum. You can just like post something on Reddit, and then people can respond to your post and upvote your post, downvote your post, and so on. If you're familiar with Reddit, you would know about sub channels in Reddit. So sub-channels just like refer to the fact that you're grouping a set of posts based on a particular topic. For instance, UW Madison has a Reddit channel, and similarly, Python has a Reddit channel. As you can see, you'll be able to see specific posts that are related to the topic when that you're trying to access. So let me actually give you an example of a complicated JSON file. So if you want to take a look at the Reddit page in JSON format, you can just like type in .json at the end of the URL. So as you can see, this is much more complicated than the very simple example that I just covered. So real world JSON files look like this in general. Uh, we have given you a lot of data sets which has to do with JSON format, but in general in the project, we actually give you a description of how exactly the data is structured so that like you know how to write programs for that. But when it comes to processing real world data sets, you often don't get such explanation about the data set, right? For instance, like how do you figure out what is the format of this particular data set? So let's actually do that. So before that, I want to mention one thing about fetching the content from Reddit or any other public website. Since there are 450 students in this class, I'm actually going to actively recommend all of you to not send requests to the direct source of information. So the reason for that is when multiple people try to send the requests for that particular JSON file, which in this example would be the UW Madison JSON. The Reddit, people who, the admin people of Reddit are going to think that there is going to be an attack on their Reddit website. So they might think you're trying to do something which is called as the DOS attack, which is an interesting attack. So if you want to learn more about such security threats and attacks, you should plan on doing the CS642 course, which will introduce to you all the security aspects of the internet. So the reason I'm saying you shouldn't send the request to the original source is that we don't want them to think that CS220 students are trying to hack their website. So instead, what I've done is I have downloaded the JSON from all of the sources, and I have like local copy of the JSON data on my course website. So on your, whenever you're trying to understand this particular demo, try to repeat the code with my course website URL instead of using the original URL. All right, so I'm going to follow the same thing as well. So I'm going to copy this URL. And before that, I want to actually show you another thing. So looks like I am not able to copy that URL. Let me actually copy it from the browser. I have that as a image. So let me actually show you what happens when I try to send a request to this particular URL. So this is demo 1, which has to do with Reddit JSON processing. Alright, so if I have my URL as the original course, sorry, not course website, original Reddit website URL, and if I try to raise a GET request to that particular URL, I'm actually going to get an error. So let me actually go ahead and raise for status so that you can see the error. Yeah. So one thing that I want to talk about is, as you can see, uh, the Reddit server is giving me an error code which is of 429 type, saying too many requests for URL. Some websites and some domains actually deny you from sending requests to specific URLs by handling this in a different way. I think like Reddit has actually now banned people from sending HTTP requests directly to access their JSON data. So don't instead of using this, I'm going to actually let me leave a note. This does not work due to 429 status code. All right. And let me actually add that note below so that it's clear. Let me go ahead and switch that URL to my course website local URL. So if I go ahead and copy paste this, uh, and let me change let me rerun this particular block of code. As you can see now, you can see that the request is going through without any issue. And let's actually take a peek at what is there inside the request. As you can see, it's like all of that content out there. So one thing that you'll notice is since the entire thing is entire data is actually within curly braces, you can actually deduce that we have the structure as a dictionary here. So let me actually go ahead and convert this to JSON first, and let me run this again. Oh, sorry, again you need to do the function call and not just say JSON. As you can see, it's of JSON format, and what you can deduce is that it's actually a dictionary. Instead of looking through the data and finding this information, you can also look up what is the type of that particular JSON that is being returned. As you can see, the type that is being returned is a dictionary. So whenever you have a dictionary, you can poke around what keys are there in the dictionary by calling the dictionary keys function. So since I know this is a dictionary, I'm going to go ahead and save this into a variable called d, and let me try to print d.keys, and then we'll see what is in there. So as you can see, there are two different keys of interest over here, which is the first one is called kind, and the next one is called data. So the data is the one which actually has the data, but let me actually go ahead and show you how you can poke around once you find the keys. So you can access a particular key by saying d of that key, right? So let me go ahead and print what is there in d of kind. As you can see, it just has something which is called as listing, which is not very useful. So I'm going to go ahead and comment this, and instead I'm going to show you what is there in d of data. So all right, there we have it. So that is the actual data that we want to get out of this JSON, right? So the next thing that you can do is, again, we need to be able to find out what type of let me actually keep moving these to new cells instead of commenting out these prints. So let me go ahead and run this again, and I'll move this to a different uh, you know yeah different cell. So I'm actually going to comment this last one because it's too much data. And let's dig into what is there in d of data. And the way that I'm going to do that is, I'm going to look at what type is d of data. As you can see, it's still of type dictionary, and because it is dictionary, I can go ahead and again look at what keys are there in that particular dictionary. There are a bunch of keys. I'm actually going to focus on this children key because that is the most interesting one. So let me go ahead and see what is there in let me access the children key, and I'll show you what is there as part of that particular uh, children data. Sorry, children, what is pointed to by the children key over here? What is the value corresponding to that particular children key? So I'm going to actually show you one thing. Let me actually show you what will happen if I assume that children is actually a dictionary. So I want to show you the error that shows up. So as you can see, this error says list object has no attribute called keys. What exactly do we need to understand by that? So it says the object is list. So which means that the data structure here is a list and not really a dictionary. So of course, another way that you can see the same information is by calling the type function instead of directly trying to assume that it is a dictionary. Let me actually, sorry, should have used the wrong thing over there. So oops. Let me go ahead and print, because if there is an error, that's not going to show what is there before that. As you can see, if I print the type, you can see a list type. So for dictionary, I told you can use the keys function to poke around and see what keys are there. For lists, on the other hand, you need to actually write a for loop to be able to see exactly what contents are there as part of the list. So let me actually write a for loop by saying for item in, since I don't know what will be there, I'm just like calling it as item. So for item in d dot date of children, I'm going to just go ahead and print what is there in item. So instead of printing, okay, let me go ahead and print everything actually, since I know there isn't going to be too much data that's going to get displayed. All right, so as you can see, each of these again are going to be a dictionary, right? So let me go ahead and print type of item instead of saying print item. So one thing that I want to oh, yeah, as I mentioned, each of that is going to be a dictionary. So let me go ahead and actually look at what keys are there inside that particular dictionary. So I'm going to say item dot keys. Oops, that took my bracket away. And as you can see, each of those has a kind and data again. So once again, I'm going to focus on items of data, and let me go ahead and print that. There is an extra bracket. Once I remove that, as you can see, this gives us a bunch of dictionaries. So each of those dictionary is going to have a lot of content. So let me focus on a couple of things over here. So before I actually take a look at what is in there, so let me actually look at what are the keys within that particular dictionary. So as you can see, there are a bunch of items, and for each Reddit post, there is a dictionary of keys, and then for the next one, there is another dictionary. The fields are similar. For example, I want to focus on title field and the score field. Title refers to the title of the topic of the post, and then score is how much upvote each topic has. And then you have things like, is the particular post is a video or not. So let me go ahead and focus on just title and score, and I'll just like go ahead and print title and score. Before that, let me add this other print which I did before. I did type of item, and then I also did type of item of data, right? All right, so let me go ahead and print item of data of title, and let me also go ahead and print item of data of score. All right. Oops, something went wrong there. All right. So as you can see, these are going to be the threads that you can see, topic threads that you can see when you go to UW Madison, subreddit of Reddit. So understandably, COVID-19 is the most common thread, and like it has a lot of upvotes and uh, interestingly, it also there is also another thread about voting. And then let's see what else. Does anyone know how to get a witness signature for absentee voting? Interesting topics to discuss. I hope like all of you stayed safe while trying to vote. Software hardware classes in fall 2020. Maybe you can refer them to CS220 in fall 2020, and they can all take CS220. Fun things like that. So you can poke around this data set and also the Python data set as well. All right, so that's how you can poke around a JSON host structure you do not know, and you can like get to the details of it, details of the data eventually. So I'm not going to be covering the next example, but I want to actually just briefly talk about it. So this is City of Madison dataset. There are a bunch of data sets from City of Madison, which I mentioned before. This particular data set, talks about specific construction, I guess. Yeah. So, which impact the bus services. And once again, I've downloaded the data for you into a local JSON file for you to download and process. So this will be interesting for you to poke around and try out on your own time. All right. So let me actually move on to the last. Oh, sorry, did the wrong thing. So let me actually talk about the last demo that I'm going to cover as part of this lecture. So this is going to deal with how to download a set of files and then download the data from each of those files. So let me actually copy this URL and first show you what exactly is there in this particular text file. So as you can see, this text file has a JSON file for each of the states in the US, and you can access each of those files by giving the file name here. And as you can see, it has a dictionary of information. So this is actually a population of Alabama state in 2000 and in 2010 and in 2015, the population count from the census data set. So what we are going to be doing is I'm going to show you how to download each of these files by writing a program. So let me actually go ahead and switch back to Jupyter Notebook. I'm going to copy paste this URL. Sorry, fumbled a minute over there. So this is going to be demo number 3, and let me actually save this as prefix URL. So the reason I'm going to save that as prefix URL is I'm going to be using this base URL for accessing multiple other URLs for each of those files, right? So let me go ahead and save this particular initial URL. Sorry, not save it. Let me go ahead and raise a get request to this particular URL, which has a list of all the files. So let me append not string prefix. Let me append the variable prefix to this particular string, which is state underscore files.txt. And sorry about that. All right. So now let me go ahead and raise for status to ensure that I'm not getting an status code as an error. And then let me, I had a dot over there, fix that. Oh, prefix URL, not prefix. Sorry about that. All right. Hmm. What? Oh, hmm. Okay. I think I have two slashes and that's causing a problem. All right, there we go. I removed the other slash and let's actually see what is getting returned because of this request. So let me go ahead and display what is there in r.x. As you can see, it's just a string of all the files. So since we know that we can very easily apply the split function to take out various parts of this particular string split by slash n. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and split r.text by slash n, and I'm going to save that into a variable called files. So let me go ahead and show you what is there in files. As expected, it's a list of all the files which got split by the slash n character. Let me actually name this as state files because it's more meaningful. All right, so what do I want to do is I want to be able to send a get request to each of those URLs, right? So I'm going to say for state in state files, and then for the URL, I'm going to add prefix plus state, not that. Let me go ahead and first print this to check whether I have the correct URL before I go ahead and, oh, prefix URL. Got it. Okay, so let me try accessing one of these. Seems to be working. All right, so that's good. We got that. So the next thing which I want to do is I want to send a request to each of those. Sorry about that. So each of those URL, and I want to send a get request again. So uh, and let me go ahead and raise for status. Always try to remember to raise for status as soon as you do this. So as you can see, it's able to fetch all of the data. Instead of doing this for the whole data set, let me actually do this, let's say, for just the first three files. And the way that I can do that is I can just create a split of my list and take out just the first three file names from my state files list, right? So let me go ahead and show you what is getting returned when we go ahead and send the request. So let me print what is coming through data. So as you can see, each of those data print statements is going to give me a dictionary, right? So I'm going to actually combine this with what you've learned from the pandas lecture. So as shown in the pandas lecture, you can use pandas to process any data set, right? So and if you have a list of dictionaries, that will be very useful for you. So I'm going to go ahead and import pandas. So let me scroll up and say from pandas I want to import data frame. Hopefully I got that right. All right, so let me go ahead and convert this data into a data frame. So I want to be able to append all of the rows into a list and then finally be able to convert that into a data frame, right? So let me go ahead and append data into rows, and if I try to convert that into a data frame, I can just call data frame of rows, and that's going to give me a data frame, right? So let me go ahead and save this into a variable called df, and let me go ahead and display df. So as you can see, this creates a neat representation, and let me get rid of just the three inputs so that we can get all the data. It takes a while for that to process, but you need to be patient while each of those files are getting downloaded. And now that the data is inside the local data structure data frame, I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple of manipulations that you can do with the data frame. So let me actually, instead of displaying the data frame, let me display the head part of the data, not here, head part of the data frame. Um, all right, so you can do cool things like set index as the name of the state that we used, instead of just having a number based index. So let me go back to this code, and to be able to do that, I need to add a field to this data dictionary saying what is the name of that particular file, right? So let me go ahead and rerun that. As you can see, now you have a new name column. And let me here, so let me actually show you how to do a set index. So set index enables you to set which particular field is going to be the index of that particular data frame. Now the boring numbered index is replaced with the proper state name. And then you can do fancy things like all right, I need to capture this into a different data frame, and let me call it as df underscore state. And any further manipulations that I'm going to show you is going to be on df underscore state. So you can do cool things like you can do a sum of all the population that is there as per the year. And you can also do other things like take a transpose, and let me show you what that does. And now you have the rows as your years, and the columns is like each of your states. And then you can get like statistics like mean and things like that per state. For instance, you can do df underscore state dot t dot mean, which is going to get you the mean population for each of those states. Scientific notation, but yeah, these are pretty much what you can do. All right, hopefully you enjoyed the lecture. I think I probably overstepped by a few minutes. My apologies. I got like really excited talking about the web because that's my area of research. All right, stay well, everyone. Take care.